again. It's another episode of SelzSpeaks podcast. We are back at it again, beautiful people. Listen, the last couple clips that I posted on my Instagram, y'all have been showing so much love, so much engagement. And a lot of people started hitting me up and DMing me talking about, I should make the next podcast on that topic, on that episode. So ladies and gentlemen, I present to you, does God choose your spouse? And oh my goodness, I can't even say I didn't realize, because I do know that this tends to be such a controversial topic and a topic that bothers so many people. And to be very honest, in my opinion, of course, I've seen a lot of people really get this one wrong from my perspective. And you're talking about someone who, I'm not what you would call a hyper religious person. I'm really all about relationship. And definitely my experiences, and also watching people that I know who went through the same thing and who trusted God the same way. God definitely does choose your spouse. But before you guys get ready to kill me and cut my throat, there's the one thing I'm going to ask you guys. I'm going to ask you to like this video, and I'm going to ask you to subscribe at this moment. Subscribe, so that as we had to get these hot topics, you can send your questions in. Listen, you could DM me on SelzJP, right? Hit me up. DM me, let me know what you was thinking. I love the feedback. I like to hear from you guys. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, because as more content comes out, we don't want you to miss a bit of it at all. We want you to catch everything. So I'm not even going to hesitate. I'm going to get right into the topic at hand. So before I even go further, right? Because somebody was saying something about, false theology. And it's so much. It's so much. But I got you. So let's just start with a basic understanding. God is God. And what that means is he can literally do whatever he wants, however he wants. If the Bible says that he knew us before we were even created, that means that our whole path, all of our decisions, these were things that God already seen. And the Bible even says that man makes plans, but God orders his steps. So if we continue to see this idea that God is directing us and guiding us in all that we do, why is it so hard to believe that he can also choose the person for you to marry? Like, people are so offended at the idea that God can choose the person that you marry. And so I'm going to share with you guys my own experience. And I'm going to also back it up with scripture. I got you guys. I got it. This is not going to be a Bible class, because I'm not here to argue with nobody. I'm going to just present the facts, and whoever feels so compelled, it is what it is. You be the judge at the end of it. And so for me, it started with a simple thing. I had already dated. It was unsuccessful. It was a mess, and it was whatever it was. And I told God, I said, you know what? I'm going to take Proverbs 3:5-6 seriously, where it says, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path. And I took that seriously. And I said, all right, from now on, I'm not going to lean on my own understanding. What does lean not on your own understanding means? It means don't trust your perception of things. Don't trust your understanding of things. How you see things, how you view things is not always the full truth. There's so much deeper. So don't put your weight on what you think you understand. Instead, rely on God, and he will direct that path. And I came to a place where I say, I don't want to date anymore. I said, God, I'm not going to move until you bring me my wife and you tell me to move. I want you to choose my wife. And so here starts the very first part of this whole thing, right? God is not going to do anything in which you don't relinquish and in essence allow him to do. Because yes, we do have free will, which is what everybody fights about when it comes to this topic. We do have free will. And yes, you can choose your own spouse the same way that you can choose your own job, and you can choose where you want to live, and you can choose what you want to do for work, and you can choose how you want to live your life. We all have free will. However, when you're talking about developing that relationship with God and taking it to a whole nother level, that's when you start to say, what? Not my will, but thy will be done. And where do we get that from? We get that from Jesus, who says, no matter how I feel, not my will, but thy will be done. So what that means is, you know what, Lord, I was looking at this girl, but I don't want my decisions. I don't want my free will to be what leads me. I want your will to be what it is. So that means that whatever you choose for me, I'm willing to accept it. And that's how this whole concept of God choosing your spouse begins. I understand in society, we've kind of walked into this place where so many people have abused. Oh, God told me, God told me you're my wife. God told me you're my wife. I know. And I'm going to get into all the aspects of that. It can be a lot. I don't think this is going to be super long because I'm going to keep it concise, but it can be a lot. But the reality is, yes, a lot of people have abused this. They have no relationship with God. They have no character change or development from God, but they use that to try and sneak into a person's life. And they use it as a way to take as much as they can from a person. So a guy comes to a girl and says, oh, God told me that you're my wife. And he's just doing that to get as much as he can from her. When the reality is that when God tells you that someone is your spouse, you usually end up in a position where you're doing far more for them than they're doing for you. That's usually what it is. When God reveals to you who your spouse is, you are now entering a season of service to that person. It isn't a season of you're going to take. No, not at all. And so that's already the first step. The people who have abused this are just looking for ways to take from the person that they're saying, hey, God told me you're my husband. God told me you're my wife. And they use that to take from the person. When in actuality, when God is revealing to your spouse, you're usually about to enter into a season, ultimately really a lifetime of service to that person, of giving to that person, right? So that like starts to set the tone from right there. God choosing your spouse isn't, oh wow, I just found a person who's about to give me some booty or give me all the things that no. It's okay. I have skills, gifts, and abilities that God has put me on this earth to be of service to this person. Okay, so then now we keep going, right? So let's say, God speaks to you and says, this person is your spouse. And he says, you can tell that person. We still ultimately have free will. So even if God reveals to you who your spouse is, the next part of this equation is very important. And that part of the equation is that you have to accept it and receive it, and they have to accept it and receive it, right? Understand, blessings, things that are spoken to you in the positive or negative, have to be received. You have to receive and accept it. If you don't accept it, if you don't want it, it won't come. For example, if I try to bless you with money, but you don't want the money, and no matter how many times I try to give it to you, you reject it, even though it was meant for you, because you choose not to receive it, you won't have it. And that is the same exact concept. God can tell you that someone is your spouse, but if that person chooses to reject it, that's their decision, and that just is what it is. All you can really do is say, hey, Lord, if it's your will, reveal it to that person and work on them. And hey, if it truly is God's will, he's going to do everything that he can, and it's up to that person to choose to accept or not. But if that person chooses not to accept it, even if you're the greatest person in the world, if they don't want it and they just choose not to accept whatever God's will is for their life, it's not going to work. And let me show you another example where we see the same thing, but it's not relationship based. God wants you to be a pastor. And he's been telling you be a pastor, and you fight it and you fight it and you fight it and you fight it. And he keeps telling you be a pastor. He's chosen what your career will be, but you fight it and you don't want to do it no matter how many times God is leading you to it. And what do? You reject it. Eventually God's going to be like, okay, you just don't want it. So maybe I'll come back another time, or you know what, whatever blessings or whatever impact that I had for you, you are now forsaking it because you don't want it. Remember, if God can choose for you your gifts and your purposes, and he can lead you, hey, I need you to move to this city. Hey, I need you to move to that. Why could he not say, this is the person that I've chosen for your partner in life? Like, think about that. And here comes the thing where we as human beings, we get overconfident, right? Someone said, God gives us free will and we use our own discernment and our own wisdom to choose a person. Listen, the Bible says that nobody knows the heart but God. So what does that mean? It means that you're going to see a person who's this great person, great girl. She prays, she this, she works out, she does that. Or a young lady finds a great guy. He's in the church. He's awesomeness. He's he's awesome. He checks all the boxes. And you think just because you find someone who meets your list and checks your boxes, that person's worthy of marrying. And they are absolutely not. For two reasons. Marriage is far more than just a checklist. Marriage is a commitment through the good and the bad. And what that means is, yeah, you met them and they were into fitness, but life happens. And so God forbid they catch a disease. And now, not because they wanted to, but because of life and whatever they're struggling with, they're no longer that sexy, fit shape or into working out that you thought. Now they're obese and they're struggling with their weight and they're going through a depression. You still ready to love them now because they don't check that box that you had before? Or you meet someone who is driven, who is ambitious, and all of a sudden, they suffer a loss in the family, someone close, and all that drive just disappears. And now the person that you're married to is a shell of themselves. You still ready to be committed? Because they're not checking your boxes anymore. And that's the reality of what life and marriage is. When you see someone, when you marry someone, you are marrying the state that person is in. They are not always in that state. You can marry a person who they were broke, but then now, throughout the course of the relationship, they figure it out and they become wealthy. Vice versa. You marry someone wealthy, things happen and they lose everything. And people sit there and they choose their partners based on these superficial characteristics or things that we think we see, thinking that we have it figured out. Just because that person's singing on the praise team, they play in church, they preach, we think that they're spiritual, when in fact it could be the far opposite. And how many times have we seen people, who like pastors, you pastor your whole life, and then one day you announce to your congregation that you don't believe in God anymore, you're atheist. You as a human being, you can't see these things coming. Your vision, your insight, your discernment is so limited. And so now in that position, right? When you're in this position where you're not sure about a person, what are you doing? Lord, is this the one for me? So if God confirms that it's the one for you, who chose the wife? He did. Whenever you're in a situation, when you're with someone and you're asking God for confirmation as to, is this the person or not? You're asking God, is this my spouse? Is this the person that you're choosing for me? Because if you truly follow God and you ask for confirmations that he says, this is not the person, then you let it go because God didn't say it was good. But if you pray and you get your confirmations and God says, yes, that's the one, then you're good because now you know through confirmations that God chose that person. But now, if you're just a person where it's like, look, I'm going to just get married. I don't need God's confirmation or not. I'm going to just do what I'm going to do. That's a completely different thing. But if you're with someone, you're asking for confirmations. Is this the person I'm supposed to be with? Is this the person I'm supposed to marry? You're asking God to choose your spouse. That's literally what you're doing, whether you realize it or not. And so, let's kind of get into this, right? So, there's no examples in the Bible. But there is. I'll give you 3 of them. Because at first I was going to give you guys 1, but I'll give you 3. So, first one is Adam and Eve, right? Adam is created. He's on earth. He's by himself. God sees that he's by himself. He says, yo, you know what? It's not good for man to be alone. I'm about to make a shorty for him. And we could say, oh, it was only one girl. What choices he had? Listen, if he didn't want her, he would have been like, God, I'm good. Like, I don't need that. If she was ugly and she was annoying, Adam would have been like, I'm cool on that. Like, cool. But obviously, what God created for Adam was appetizing and amazing. I mean, it was so good that he wasn't supposed to eat the tree, but Shorty presented him food butt naked and he ate the tree, no problem. It didn't say Adam was hesitating. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but it didn't say it in the book. So that means whatever God made for him through in what was Eve was good enough that when it was time for him to not listen to God, he did it, no problem. So that means what he had, he wanted it. He wanted it. And remember, it just says Adam goes to sleep. Adam wakes up. Boom, here is Eve. And then Adam is like, oh, that's mine. Claimed it, received it. God presented Eve to Adam. Adam received it. All right, let's go to another example. Let's use Isaac and Rebekah, right? So Abraham prays and he's like, you know what? He talks to his servant. He says, hey, I need a wife for my son Isaac, right? So he sends his servant to go find a wife in his father's, in his family's camp, far off. The servant prays and asks God to show him who the girl is. He asked God to give him confirmation. Right? This is all in Genesis 24. Y'all read it for yourselves. I'm not about to give every verse. So as it goes, right? Actually, I'll give you guys a verse. Genesis 24:40. Servant goes, the Lord before whom I have walked faithfully will send his angel with you and make your journey a success so that you can get a wife from my son, from my own clan, and from my father's family. I believe that's Abraham talking. I just took down the verses. You guys, again, look into it. Rebecca's family, right? Laban and Bethuel, they say, this is from the Lord. We can say nothing to you one way or another. Take Rebecca. So even Rebecca's family realized, oh, wait, this is a God thing. This is not a human thing. This is a God thing. All right. And then what happens? Rebecca accepts it. She accepts it. It is presented to her. This is the choice that God has made for you. Do it. You accept. She accepts. Then she goes to Isaac. And I mean, it's in a short moment, but it's like, look, this is who God wants for you. You want her? Yup. Let's go. And boom. God chose Rebecca for Isaac. Another example of God choosing your spouse. And I'll give you one more, which some people might say is not fair, but yeah, it kind of is. Joseph and Mary. Why do I say that? Because first, on a very humanly level, Joseph and Mary were supposed to get married. Cool, no problem. However, once Mary gets pregnant and is going through that whole ordeal of, oh, I just found out I got pregnant by God, Joseph was done with her. He was ready to leave her. He was done. But what happens? An angel visits him. So God basically says, hey, this is the wife I have for you. She's doing something special. Don't leave her. So why does Joseph stay? It wasn't by his choice. It's because God told him, this is who I have for you. Don't leave her. She's fulfilling something special for me, but this is for you. Don't go nowhere. And so because of God telling him to stay, he stays. Now we can argue that last one is a stretch. I don't, because it is, again, God putting his influence, right, into relationships, which is what he does, whether we want to believe that he does or not. And so I answered this in that clip that I put on Instagram, and I'm going to briefly touch on it now. People say, okay, well, we hear a lot of people say that God chose my spouse, God chose my partner, and they get divorced left and right. So if God put something together, how can it be put asunder? It's a very simple concept. I gave the deeper explanation in the other video, and I'm going to give a simpler one now. Whatever it is that God gives you, if you do not steward it properly, it will be taken from you. God can give you a gift of music, a gift to sing. If you don't steward that gift, it will be compromised and possibly taken from you. God can give you wealth and money. If you do not steward it properly, it will be taken from you. God could put you together in a marriage. If you do not steward your relationship properly, if your wife does not steward her husband properly, if a husband does not steward his wife properly, it will be taken from you. And what does that mean to steward? It means that in the process, because I don't want to go into deep explanation. I'm going to do a quick one. When you prayed and you said, God, I don't want to date anymore. I want to trust you. Reveal to me who my spouse is. Let me know who you chose for me. Bring to me my husband. Bring to me my wife. God said, all right, bet. But every time that God gives you something, he puts you through a process to be prepared to not only receive it, but to maintain it. So you become more patient. You become more understanding. You become aware of your own flaws. And you're supposed to take this knowledge and this character growth into what God is now giving you, whether it be wealth, whether it be territorial growth, whether it is a marriage or a relationship. However, now, when you are in this relationship and you now begin to ignore or disregard all of the lessons that you learned and you decide to revert back to bad behavior, do not think you will still be able to have the same blessings by exercising bad behavior. So if God helped you become sexually disciplined when you were praying for a wife, and now you finally become a husband, And now in your third, fourth year of marriage, you start making excuses and you now are no longer sexually disciplined. Do not think that just because God chose that wife for you, he's also going to tolerate you being sexually indisciplined and unfaithful and still be allowed to keep that wife. That is why God ordained marriages or God put together marriages fall apart, because people think that once they get to marriage, they've arrived. And because God put it together, it's all good. It's not. You have to continue to grow. It's a journey. You continue to move forward. Okay? And someone asked me, all right, well, when you're in a God-centered marriage, what's the point if you're still going to go through the same things that everybody else goes through? Oh, there's a very different point. Because one thing, when you're married, you're going to get to a point where you're going to want to divorce this person. That's every marriage. Like, I've asked pastors this, I've asked atheists this. Ain't not one person that I've spoken to and I've asked them, was there a point where you wanted to divorce your partner? They all say yes. And that is just what marriage is. Listen, I've been married for 5 years. I had my moments when I was like, yeah, I don't think this is going to work. I've had my moments. But what keeps me and what will keep you in your relationship is, what is your foundation? When your foundation is yourself, I chose this person, this was my choice. Oh, it's very easy to doubt your own choice. It's very easy to be like, I messed up. We do that all the time. We buy things, and because we feel like we messed up, we try to return it immediately. We try to renege on promises that we make to ourselves all the time. We are human beings, are so fickle. So if you are your foundation for your relationship, it ain't gonna last long. Not at all. That's why there's so much divorce, because we've taken out the creator of marriage out of the equation of marriage. God created marriage, not man. Mankind is way too flimsy and way too promiscuous to be sitting there saying, I'm going to dedicate myself to one person for the rest of my life and live in service to this person. That's truly what real marriage is. I will be of service to this person for the rest of my life. I will give all that I have to this person and love them unconditionally. That is not a man-made concept. Mankind is way too selfish and self-centered for that. To make covenant, man is going to come up with the idea to be dedicated to one woman? No. That's a God concept. And so now when you try to do marriage without God, yeah, of course it's going to kind of not function the way it's supposed to, because it doesn't have the principles and the values. And so somebody else said something else too. I'll address these other 2 points. Someone said, okay, well, there's been multiple instances of polygamy in the Bible, and so that should be okay. And all right, let's address that. So in the majority of instances of polygamy in the Bible, just because things are allowed doesn't mean, what's the phrasing that they use? They say just because we see an instance of it doesn't mean it becomes, I can't remember the phrase, but it's something along the lines of, just because we see something in the Bible doesn't mean that was something God was encouraging, because every instance of polygamy you see in the Bible came with massive issues. Example, Jacob wanted to marry Rachel. He ends up marrying Leah. Then he ends up marrying Rachel. That came with issues. Abraham was married to Sarah. He had his servant Hagar. He ends up sleeping with Hagar because he's trying to rush God's plan. That came with issues. Solomon had 1,000 wives. That came with massive issues. Everyone loves to use the polygamy example in regards to this conversation and not realize that everyone in the Bible who practiced polygamy had issues. It did not work out smoothly for them. It wasn't a positive and great experience. And then if we really want to get hyper biblical and start using verses, right, we could use 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 2. Again, I don't want to make this a Bible study, but it just is what it is. And it says, it talks about the standards for a bishop. He must be blameless and a husband of one wife. Now we could say, hey, not everybody's trying to be a bishop. I understand that. I get that. But if we're going to say that the standard for a bishop is a standard that's pleasing in God's eyes, well, then it means that standard right there is something that is held in high esteem, a husband of one wife. When you read the Bible, it's always pushing towards monogamy. We can argue the whole Western, Eastern culture thing. Listen, it's just information. How you choose to receive is how you choose to receive it. I've learned a long time ago, people going to believe what they want to believe, and that's perfectly okay. It is what it is. But my thing is, for those who need this and those who could benefit for it, that's who I'm here for. So ultimately, when we talk about it, does God choose your spouse? If you allow him to, if you give him the opportunity to, in the same way that he could change your life, but you have to be willing to surrender that. If you're not willing to surrender your will and accept what his will is for you and what his will is for your life, for your gifts, where you live, the house that you live, the cars that you drive. If you're not willing to surrender that, then there's only but so much God can do for you, because he's always going to be limited to what you allow him to do, because God is always going to respect our free will. So God could very much have somebody amazing for you, but if you're so bent on marrying who you want to marry, then it's just going to be what it is. And God's going to just work with you where you at. And here's a misconception that people have sometimes. A lot of times we feel like just because we marry a good person, that's the right person. And that's far from the truth. Not every good person is the right person for you. Remember, the person that you marry is the person that you're growing with. And you don't know what you're going to grow into. You have your dreams, you have your desires, you have your goals, but you don't know how life will impact you. And so when God is choosing someone for you, he sees the big picture, and he understands that when you are growing in this way, this is why this person will be perfect for you. And when you have these failures, this is why this person is perfect for you. And when you're going through these valleys, this is exactly why this person is perfect for you. And you may not see why this person is perfect for you, but I see why this person is perfect for you. And if you trust me, if you trust God, and you understand that everything that God gives you is far better than you can ever give yourself and is the best for you, then yeah, you give up those decisions easily. You lean not on your own understanding. And I've had many conversations with friends of mine who at first didn't believe it at all. And then they went through life experiences, and when they surrendered the process to God and they trusted the process, and now they're like, yo, at first I did not believe that God chooses your spouse. I completely feel so differently. And so anybody listening today, listen, I want you to know, yes, I understand people are out there abusing it. They go up to people randomly and they're like, oh, God told me this and God told me that. Listen, you tend to know when that person is sent by God and when it's not. Because the thing is, just because God reveals to you that person is your spouse, he gonna tell you how to move. When God revealed to me my wife, it wasn't, okay, that's your wife, now go tell her. No. There was a lot of things I had to do. And it was, all right, do this, keep quiet, do that. And in the same time, he was revealing it to her. And what's happened now is, in my situation, is that God revealed to me my wife, I accepted it and I received it. And when he revealed to her that I was her husband, she accepted it and she received it. Me and my wife didn't date. There was no dating period for us. On her own, she got her confirmations and a word from the Lord. And on my own, I got my confirmation and a word from the Lord. After a crazy experience prior. But we both got our confirmation and we accepted it and we received each other and we said, we're going to do this. Because we both believe that we are the best for each other, because that's what God said. And at times when I've been married, when I go through my struggles, I come back to a place where I'm like, all right, God, you chose this wife for me. So even when I don't see it for myself, even when I don't see why she's the best for me, I know she's the best for me. And that's the difference. Because if I had to say, yo, I chose her, but she switched up and her personality is not who I thought she was going to be, I don't got nothing to stand on. So again, does God choose your spouse? If you allow him to. If you allow him to. If you surrender that decision to him. In the same way that, does God choose my career? If you allow him to. Does God choose where I can live? If you allow him to. Does God choose what car I'll drive? What state I will live in? What will be my profession? If you allow him to. That's what true surrender is. Giving up these decisions. It doesn't mean that we lose the concept of free will. It means that we are trading in our will for his will. And I could go on and on. It's crazy that we almost at 30 minutes. I wasn't even trying for it to be that long. But understand that it's not this dogmatic thing. And listen, for a person who's married and you got married without ever consulting God, it doesn't mean that your relationship is tragic. It's going to be a mess. God's going to take whatever you have and he's going to work with whatever you give him. I know a couple that met in the club and together they found God at the same time and God has worked through their marriage. But this is really so much for the people like who's single and trying to figure it out and don't know what to do. And it's like, listen, if you're not even married yet, if you trust in God with everything else, why not one of the biggest decisions of your life? I always feel like the 3 biggest decisions of a person's life: what you do for a living, who you're going to serve, and who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. These things are major. And so it's like, okay, well, if you say you're going to serve God, that's one decision done. Well, God can show you what you're going to do to make a living. So if you're going to allow God to make the majority of the decisions, why not your relationship? And that's the part where when it comes to God, people just never want to do. Because they think, oh, if God chooses my spouse, I'm going to be with some hyper-religious fat person or unattractive person or somebody I don't want to be with. Look at me. God chose me for my wife and chose my wife for me. I'm a big freak. I'm just a freak for my wife. I'm fun. I'm a musician who is doing things that stereotypically musicians shouldn't be able to do. I've been able to experience amazing things, go amazing places, do amazing things. God has blessed me massively. The things that I've been able to accomplish, things I've been able to see during my life, no one ever could have predicted, but God knew. And if people judge me based on stereotypes or exterior, you would have missed all the blessings that God had for me. But when God revealed me to my wife, she trusted him, and she has reaped the benefits and the rewards of that as the same as I. And so I say this to you as a person who's lived it and enjoyed the blessings of it and also seen it work for others. So I say this to you, it's like, if you trust in God with everything else, why not one of the most important decisions? So yeah, does God choose your spouse? If you let him. If you ask him to, he will. If you put that decision in his hands, he will. He will. But if you choose not to let him make that decision, if you don't want him to make that decision, he won't. God's not going to force himself on you. He's not going to force his will on you. It has to just be a will that you want. It has to be something you're willing to accept. And that's just it. So listen, man, this has been fun. I could go on and on about this. It's one of my favorite topics, and it's always so back and forth, but I'm going to just leave it where it's at. Look, I love y'all. It has been another episode of SelzSpeaks. Man, this one feels like I was talking for 5 minutes and it's already been 30. But listen, I love y'all. Again, like, subscribe, share this with your friends, share this with your church youth groups, share this with your atheist friends, share this with your partner, whoever you with, dating, married, whatever. And it's a great discussion topic, man. Holla at me, talk to me. Till next time I see you. I love you guys. SelzSpeaks. Like, subscribe. I'll see you guys till next time. Peace.